Look at a map of West Africa. You will notice a narrow sliver of land squeezed between Ghana and Benin. This is Togo. At its narrowest point, the entire country is barely 115 kilometers wide. Yet, within this incredibly tight geographic corridor, an extreme environmental battle unfolds every single day. To the south, a violent ocean is swallowing the coastline. To the north, the relentless winds of the Sahel Desert crack the earth wide open. In a world dominated by digital speed, the people here are still using their bare hands, red clay, woven ropes, and ancient faith to negotiate their survival with nature. I want to take you across this narrow strip of earth. We are not here as tourists merely observing from a comfortable distance. We are stepping directly into their daily fight for existence. Our journey begins at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. Here, the boundary between life and destruction is measured by a single crashing wave. It is 4:30 in the morning in the coastal town of Anego. The air is thick with a sharp, stinging salt mist. The sky is still a deep bruised purple, holding on to the last shadows of the night. Before the sun even crests the horizon, the fishermen are already awake. They gather on the wet, shifting sands of the coast. In the dim light, you can see massive piles of thick, coarse rope. These are the traditional beach seines. When completely soaked in seawater, these massive fishing nets can weigh several tons. The men do not speak much. The roaring sound of the Atlantic Ocean drowns out almost everything else. This coastline is facing one of the most severe coastal erosion crises in West Africa. Every single year, the ocean advances 10 to 15 meters inland. If you look closely along the shoreline, you can see the exposed brick foundations of half-collapsed houses. The ocean is literally eating their homes. But these men refuse to leave their ancestral land. They tie thick cotton rags around their waists to prevent the heavy ropes from tearing their skin. Over 100 men form two long, parallel lines facing the water. Their bare feet sink deep into the cold, wet sand to find a solid anchor point. An older man stands near the water edge, holding a piece of rusted iron. He strikes it rhythmically, creating a sharp, metallic beat that cuts through the ocean wind. Following this strict rhythm, the men lean back simultaneously. They pull the massive rope with their bare hands. The muscles in their backs tighten and strain under the immense weight of the ocean dragging against the net. This arduous physical process lasts for 4 to 5 continuous hours. There is no heavy machinery here to assist them. There is only human endurance matched against the raw power of the Atlantic current. Slowly, inch by inch, the net emerges from the crashing surf. The catch is often modest compared to the immense effort expended. Small silvery fish flip desperately on the wet sand. Immediately, the women of the community step forward. They carry wide woven baskets on their heads, collecting the fish before the brutal morning heat sets in. Because there is no reliable refrigeration, the catch must be preserved instantly. Just a few meters away from the crashing waves, thick plumes of gray smoke rise into the morning sky. The women have repurposed old, rusted steel oil drums into rudimentary smoking racks. They lay the small fish over smoldering wood fires. The smoke stings the eyes, but it dries the fish perfectly, preventing it from spoiling in the heavy tropical humidity. This is how they secure their vital protein for the weeks ahead. They trade these smoked fish for cassava and maize at the inland markets. The ocean here is both a ruthless destroyer and a vital provider. As the sun climbs higher, the coastal heat becomes oppressive. We leave the salty, turbulent shores of Anejo behind. Moving just a few kilometers inland, the landscape shifts drastically. The roaring waves are replaced by an eerie, stagnant silence. We are entering a world of shallow water and deep-rooted faith. Welcome to Lake Togo. Specifically, we are approaching the isolated communities of Togaville on the northern shore. The morning mist here does not taste of salt. It smells of decaying leaves, damp mud, and sweet freshwater algae. The surface of the lake is as flat and reflective as a polished mirror. Through the thick, creeping fog, a solitary figure appears. A man is standing perfectly still on a narrow wooden pirogue. This traditional canoe was hollowed out from a single massive tree trunk, using nothing but an iron adze and fire. He holds a long bamboo pole, pushing it gently into the muddy bottom of the lake to propel the boat forward. The water barely makes a sound as the heavy wood glides across its surface. Togaville is effectively cut off from the mainland by this vast expanse of brackish water. Because of this extreme geographic isolation, time seems to have stopped completely. Many of these clayhouse settlements do not have access to the national electricity grid. Life here is dictated purely by the rising and setting of the sun. But there is another invisible force that governs every action in this marshland. This is the undisputed historical heartland of Vodun, widely known to the outside world as voodoo. Forget the exaggerated cinematic depictions of dark magic. Here, Vodun is an intricate, highly structured belief system rooted in a profound respect for nature. It is the fundamental belief that every tree, every river, and every stone possesses a living, breathing spirit. As you walk through the narrow dirt paths of the village, you will notice small mounds of hardened clay near the doorways. These are the Legba shrines. They are built by the villagers to protect the household from misfortune and to honor the spirits of the earth. The people here do not attempt to conquer their environment. They ask for permission to use its resources. The local fishermen use hand-woven funnel traps made from split bamboo strips. They sink these intricate traps deep into the dark mud to catch crabs and freshwater catfish. Back on the solid ground, the rhythmic thudding of heavy wood echoes through the entire village. Women are using massive wooden mortars and pestles to pound boiled cassava roots. They strike the heavy pestle down with intense physical force, turning the tough roots into a thick, sticky dough known as fufu. It is exhausting, back-breaking labor. Sweat pours down their faces in the suffocating, stagnant humidity of the marsh. Yet, they work in a steady, unbroken rhythm, often humming low, traditional melodies to keep the pace. When night falls over Togaville, the darkness is absolute and overwhelming. The only sources of light are small kerosene storm lanterns. The flickering orange flames cast long, dancing shadows against the cracked clay walls of the traditional houses. The silence is only broken by the sound of insects and the occasional splash of a fish in the dark lake. But this heavy humidity will soon be a distant memory. From the stagnant waters of Togaville, we will soon climb into the sky. We are heading west, toward a place where the earth touches the clouds. A place where the sun is swallowed by an eternal sea of fog. Leaving the mist-shrouded peaks of Mount Agu, the journey pushes relentlessly northward. As the elevation drops, the lush, dripping greenery of the cloud forest is violently stripped away. The heavy humidity evaporates, replaced by the bone-dry breath of the Sahel. This is the infamous Harmattan wind, blowing directly from the vast expanse of the Sahara Desert. It carries a fine, suffocating veil of pale dust that coats everything in its path. The temperature surges to a blistering 40 degrees Celsius by midday. The deep volcanic soils of the south are gone, replaced by a cracked, baked red earth. We have entered the Atacora Valley, a harsh and unforgiving geographical depression. At first glance, the landscape appears completely hostile to human habitation. Scattered, skeletal baobab trees stand against the pale, dust-choked sky like ancient monuments. Yet, out of this cracked red earth rises one of the most extraordinary architectural achievements in West Africa. These are the Takienta, the traditional mud fortresses of the Batamariba people. From a distance, they look like giant sandcastles sculpted directly from the bleeding soil. There is no concrete, no steel reinforcement, and no deep excavated foundation. These towering structures are born entirely from a mixture of wet red clay, crushed stones, and dried straw. The Batamariba are master builders, relying solely on their bare hands and centuries of inherited engineering knowledge. Every single wall is shaped, smoothed, and compacted by human palms. The walls are incredibly thick, designed deliberately to insulate the interior against the searing daytime heat. A typical Takienta is built as a highly functional two-story fortress. The lower level is cool and heavily fortified, serving as a secure shelter for livestock during the night. The upper level features a flat terrace surrounded by conical turrets, capped with woven thatched roofs. This upper terrace is the true living space, where the family dries their vital grain harvests under the brutal sun. As dawn breaks over the Atacora Valley, the air is cold, a stark contrast to the impending daytime heat. An older Batamariba woman emerges from the low, circular doorway of her fortress. She must bend completely in half to step outside, a design feature intended to force any intruder to bow down and expose their neck. The air immediately smells of dry dust and the faint, bitter scent of wood smoke. She kneels on the hard-packed earth courtyard to begin her morning routine. Using only 3 blackened stones, she constructs a rudimentary hearth. She carefully arranges a few precious, dry twigs, knowing that firewood is a scarce resource in this barren valley. A small flame flickers, casting a warm orange glow against the deep red clay of the walls. She reaches into a woven basket to extract a handful of dried millet grains. She places the hard, pale yellow grains onto a large, smooth, concave grinding stone that has been passed down for generations. Taking a smaller, cylindrical river stone in both hands, she begins to crush the grain. The harsh, grating sound of stone sliding against stone echoes across the silent, dusty courtyard. Her movements are slow, deliberate, and practiced, requiring immense upper body strength. Fine, pale flour begins to accumulate at the edges of the stone, catching the morning light. This flour will be boiled into a thick, dense porridge, the primary source of calories that fuels their grueling daily labor. Inside the cool, dark interior of the turrets, the family's survival is carefully stored. Massive clay jars, sealed tight with mud, hold the year's harvest of millet and sorghum. The Batamariba live in a state of absolute self-sufficiency. They grow their own food, build their own homes, and craft their own tools from the immediate environment. Outside the fortress walls, the spiritual life of the Batamariba is physically manifested in the earth. Small cone-shaped mounds of clay, often adorned with animal skulls or feathers, stand guard near the entrance. These are the ancestral altars, the focal point of their deeply rooted animist beliefs. They believe that the spirits of their ancestor reside within the very soil they use to build their homes. Therefore, the act of building, repairing, and living within the mud is a continuous religious ritual. As midday approaches, the heat becomes a physical weight pressing down on the valley. The temperature radiation from the baked red earth distorts the horizon into a shimmering mirage. Most physical labor ceases during these peak hours to conserve precious bodily fluids. Water here is not a simple commodity. It is the absolute currency of life. During the brutal 7-month dry season, the local rivers shrink into stagnant, muddy puddles. Young women must balance heavy clay pitchers on their heads, walking for hours under the searing sun to find viable water sources. When they return, every single drop is carefully rationed. The water is used for drinking, for cooking the millet porridge, and for mixing the mud plaster. The harsh winds and occasional torrential rains constantly erode the outer layers of the mud walls. To prevent the structure from dissolving, the women engage in a meticulous replastering process. They mix fresh red clay with water and cow dung, creating a thick, sticky paste. With rhythmic, sweeping motions, they apply this mixture to the exterior walls with their bare hands. The wet clay fills the cracks, smoothing out the weathered surface and hardening like a protective shell in the sun. This tactile connection to the earth is fundamental to their existence. The mud protects the people from the elements, and in return, the people constantly repair and honor the mud. There is no concept of non-biodegradable waste here. When a family eventually moves and a taquienta is abandoned, it is not left as a permanent scar on the landscape. Without human hands to constantly maintain it, the rain slowly washes the mud away. Over a few rainy seasons, the towering fortress simply melts back into the ground. It returns completely to the red earth from which it was born, leaving absolutely no trace of human occupation. It is a cycle of life and architecture that perfectly mirrors the rhythm of nature itself. But the Atacora Valley is not the final frontier of Togo's extreme environments. If the mud fortresses are a way of building walls against the wind, our final destination reveals an entirely different survival strategy. We must push even further north, to the very edge of the Sahelian border. We are heading toward a place where humans do not build shelters on the ground, but rather hide inside the bones of the earth itself. The journey pushes us to the absolute northern limit of the Togolese Republic. We are entering the harsh and unforgiving territory of the Savannes region. Here, the geographical boundaries blur with the arid frontiers of Burkina Faso. The landscape transforms dramatically into an endless ocean of tall, sun-scorched yellow grass. Solitary acacia and baobab trees cast long, skeletal shadows across the cracked earth. The harmattan wind howls with an unrestrained fury across these open plains. It carries a blinding mist of fine Saharan sand that coats the skin and irritates the lungs. Suddenly, the flat, desolate horizon is abruptly broken by a massive geological anomaly. These are the towering, sheer sandstone cliffs of the Dapaong and Namujioga areas. They rise completely vertical, cutting like a jagged knife edge against the pale, dust-choked sky. From the valley floor, the rocky face appears entirely lifeless, hostile and impenetrable. But if you focus your gaze on the narrow, horizontal fissures near the summit, you will witness the impossible. There are ancient human structures built directly into the dizzying vertical drop. These are the legendary cave dwellings of Nano and Maprug. For centuries, the local populations used these high-altitude caverns as their ultimate sanctuaries. They did not climb up into this barren rock by choice. They were driven up the cliff face to escape the brutal slave raids and the violent tribal conflicts that swept across the vulnerable plains below. The sheer, deadly drop of the cliff was their only reliable defense against invaders. Today, the descendants of these resilient people still utilize the caves, though the nature of the primary threat has changed. The enemy is no longer human armies. It is the extreme climate itself. To reach the hidden cave entrances, you must ascend a series of precarious, hand-carved wooden ladders. The ladders are almost completely vertical, wedged dangerously into narrow crevices in the crumbling rock. Below your feet is a fatal, heart-stopping drop to the valley floor. The climb demands total physical concentration, incredible core strength, and an intimate, inherited knowledge of the stone. When you finally pull yourself over the limestone lip and step inside the cavern, the environmental shift is instantly shocking. Outside, the savanna is baking under a merciless 40-degree daytime sun. Inside the deep cave, the air is instantly cool, heavy, and completely still. The thick sandstone walls act as a perfect, natural thermal insulator against the extreme Sahelian heat. The only sound is the quiet, rhythmic dripping of condensation from the low ceiling and the faint rustle of bat wings deep in the shadows. As your eyes slowly adjust to the dim, ambient light filtering through the entrance, the true scale of human ingenuity becomes apparent. The dusty floor of the cave is lined with dozens of massive, cylindrical clay granaries. Some of these traditional earthen containers stand nearly 2 meters tall. They are masterfully constructed from the exact same red clay found in the valley far below. Every single handful of that heavy wet mud was carried up the vertical ladders by human strength alone. The villagers use these cool, dry, naturally protected chambers to store their most precious survival resource. Inside the thick, mud-sealed walls lies the entire community's harvested supply of dry sorghum and millet. This underground vault is their ultimate insurance policy against the brutal, unforgiving 7-month dry season. The dry season in the Savans region is an endurance test of unimaginable cruelty. Every single drop of surface water evaporates, leaving the wide riverbeds cracked, baked, and completely desolate. To find water, the young women of the community must embark on an arduous, highly dangerous daily expedition. They walk for several consecutive hours across the scorching, shadeless plains before the sun reaches its peak. They carry wide aluminum basins in heavy, porous clay pots balanced perfectly on the crowns of their heads. Their destination is usually a bone-dry riverbed that still holds a hidden, subterranean moisture reserve beneath the sand. Using simple, worn wooden scoops and their bare, calloused hands, they dig deep, narrow holes into the sandy bottom. The sand is loose and constantly collapses back into the pit, requiring frustrating, repetitive labor. Once they hit the damp layer, they wait patiently in the suffocating heat for hours. They watch as muddy, brown water slowly and reluctantly seeps into the excavated pits. Every single cup of this cloudy water is scooped up with meticulous, desperate care, ensuring not a single drop is spilled into the dust. To make it drinkable, they stretch pieces of tightly woven cotton cloth over their clay pots. They slowly pour the muddy liquid through the fabric, filtering out the heavy sand and debris. The journey back to the village is an agonizing test of human limits. They fight against the suffocating afternoon heat, while bearing a crushing, shifting weight on their delicate cervical spines. Because water is acquired through such immense physical sacrifice and suffering, its usage is strictly governed by ancient tradition and absolute necessity. Bathing is a rare, almost non-existent luxury during these months. Personal hygiene is maintained by simply wiping the skin with small, damp cloths or using fine wood ash. The gathered water is prioritized entirely for human hydration, cooking the thick daily sorghum porridge and keeping the essential livestock alive. As the afternoon sun reaches its absolute zenith, the entire northern region seems to hold its breath. The intense heat radiation creates thick, rippling optical mirages across the yellow grass, making the horizon dance and warp. All heavy physical labor comes to a complete halt to prevent fatal heat stroke. The villagers retreat to the deep, shaded overhangs of the cliffs, sitting in absolute silence to conserve their rapidly depleting energy. An older man, his skin deeply weathered and wrinkled like the rough bark of a baobab tree, sits near the edge of a rock shelf. He slowly and methodically packs a carved wooden pipe with locally grown, highly pungent tobacco leaves. She strikes a piece of raw flint against rusted iron, the tiny brief spark illuminating his deep, fiercely focused eyes. He exhales a thin, fragrant stream of gray smoke that is instantly snatched away by the dry, howling wind. He gazes out over the vast, desolate yet breathtaking beauty of the savanna stretching infinitely toward the horizon. He knows, just as his ancestors knew, that survival here is not about aggressively conquering the land. It is about knowing exactly when to move, when to hide, and when to simply endure the wrath of the sky. The people of the cliffs do not try to fight the extreme dry season. They patiently outwait it in the cool, silent shadows of the earth. This quiet, unbreakable resilience is the defining characteristic of Togo's extreme north. They have forged a life in a place where most outsiders would quickly perish. But our exhaustive journey through the hidden extremes of this narrow country is now nearing its final chapter. We have witnessed the violent, daily struggle against the crashing waves of the Atlantic Ocean. We have navigated the isolated, deeply spiritual marshes and stagnant waters of the Voodoo heartland. We have climbed into the damp, freezing chill of the eternal mountain fog to harvest bitter seeds. And we have baked under the Sahelian sun alongside the master builders of the red mud fortresses. It is now time to look back at the collective soul of the people who call this brutal, beautiful sliver of land their home. It is time to understand what their existence means for the rest of our rapidly modernizing world. As the sun begins its final, slow descent over West Africa, the entire narrow corridor of Togo undergoes a profound atmospheric transformation. The brutal, unrelenting heat of the day finally breaks, giving way to the deep, heavy shadows of the approaching night. To truly understand the essence of this country, you must observe how its people embrace the darkness. Down on the extreme southern coast, the Atlantic Ocean never sleeps. Its roaring, rhythmic crashing seems to echo even louder in the twilight. The fishermen of Anejo sit silently by the dying, glowing embers of their smoking racks. Their exhausted bodies rest heavily against the cooling sand. The salty evening breeze slowly dries the layers of sweat on their skin. They look out at the black, turbulent water that is actively eating their homeland piece by piece. They know with absolute certainty that the ocean will return tomorrow to claim another meter of the shore. But they also know they will be waiting at the water's edge with their heavy ropes. Moving slightly inland to the stagnant shores of Lake Togo, the ancient voodoo shrines are enveloped in complete pitch black. The only illumination across the vast marshland comes from the trembling, pale yellow flames of kerosene lanterns. These tiny lights reflect off the still, dark water like fallen stars. The air here smells intensely of damp earth, decaying water lilies, and sharp wood ash. Families sit close together on woven reed mats, eating their heavy cassava porridge in quiet communion. Hundreds of kilometers to the west, in the dense cloud forests of Mount Agu, the night brings a freezing, bone-chilling dampness. The eternal fog thickens to the point where all visual reference points vanish completely. The cocoa farmers retreat deep into their small, insulated mud brick homes. They listen to the heavy, continuous dripping of condensation falling from the ancient mahogany canopy onto their thatched roofs. Further north, in the arid Atacora Valley, the baked red mud of the Taquienta fortresses finally begins to radiate the intense heat it absorbed all day. The Batamariba families climb up the notched wooden logs to gather on the flat, upper terraces of their clay towers. They lie on their backs against the hard, dry roof looking up at a vast, unpolluted canopy of brilliant stars. They breathe in the dry, dusty air of the Harmattan wind, feeling the ancient clay pulse beneath them. And at the absolute northern edge of the country, inside the towering sandstone cliffs of Dapaong, the caves fall completely silent. The massive clay granaries stand like silent, imposing sentinels in the pitch-black caverns, physically guarding the community's survival. Looking across these 5 extreme landscapes simultaneously, a singular undeniable truth emerges. This is not a country defined merely by its arbitrary geographical borders or its economic output. It is defined by a staggering, almost incomprehensible level of human resilience. In the modern, highly industrialized world, the default human response to a harsh environment is to immediately alter it with brute force. We build massive concrete seawalls to block the advancing ocean. We clear-cut ancient forests to create flat, easily accessible farmland. We blast through solid rock mountains to lay down perfectly straight asphalt roads. We operate under the fundamental, arrogant assumption that nature is a chaotic enemy to be conquered, subdued, and strictly controlled. But the isolated people of Togo represent a completely different evolutionary and philosophical path. They do not possess the heavy machinery, the vast capital, or the desire required to dominate the earth. Instead, they have mastered the absolute, necessary art of physical surrender. This is not a surrender born of defeat or weakness. It is a highly calculated, deeply intelligent, and profoundly respectful adaptation to the natural order. They understand that fighting the Atlantic current with bare hands is a mathematical impossibility. So, they use the current's own violent momentum to help pull their heavy nets ashore. They know they cannot clear the eternal, suffocating fog from the mountain peaks. So, they use its dark, lingering moisture to perfectly ferment their bitter cocoa seeds. They realize they cannot stop the scorching, skin-cracking Saharan wind. So, they build thick, windowless fortresses of red mud to hide quietly from its wrath. They accept the cruel reality that the drought will inevitably drain their rivers. So they retreat into the cool, dark belly of the stone cliffs to outwait the sun. Their daily survival is built upon a foundation of intimate, generational observation. They listen constantly to the subtle, changing shifts in the wind direction. They read the microscopic variations in the color and texture of the topsoil. They track the dropping moisture content of a drying seed with the precision of a scientific instrument. This intimate, unbroken dialogue with the environment is something that the modern world has almost entirely lost. We live our lives inside climate-controlled boxes, completely detached from the raw, physical reality of the planet we inhabit. But here, on this incredibly narrow sliver of West African dirt, the connection between human flesh and the raw earth remains unbroken. It is undeniably a life of immense physical hardship. It is a life characterized by cracked, calloused skin, chronically exhausted muscles, and the constant, looming threat of starvation. Yet, existing deep within this unrelenting hardship, there is a quiet, enduring, and undeniable dignity. There is no artificial rush here, no manufactured corporate urgency, no relentless psychological pursuit of endless material accumulation. There is only the absolute, undeniable present moment. There is only the simple, profound, daily triumph of living to see another dawn break over the horizon. When you witness an older woman meticulously smoothing wet clay onto the walls of her ancestral home with her bare hands, you are not just looking at a primitive construction technique. You are looking directly at a living prayer. It is a silent, physical pact made between a fragile human being and the ancient soil that sustains her. When you see a young girl balancing a heavy clay pot of muddy water on her cervical spine, walking for miles across a baking, shadeless savanna, you are witnessing the rawest, purest distillation of the human will to live. Many of the younger generation have attempted to leave these extreme conditions behind. They board crowded, rusted minibuses heading directly south toward the sprawling, chaotic concrete expanse of Lomé, the capital city. They desperately seek out the promised comforts of the modern era: paved roads, stable electricity grids, and constant digital connectivity. But in the suffocating heat of the urban slums, totally disconnected from the soil and the rhythm of the seasons, many find themselves completely adrift. They quickly realize that the physical comforts of the city often come with a different, more insidious kind of extreme poverty. It is a poverty of absolute isolation and deeply fractured identity. And so, a quiet, steady, and inevitable migration often occurs in reverse. Many eventually return to the cracked, red earth of the Atacora Valley or the slippery, misty slopes of Mount Agu. They willingly return to the backbreaking physical labor of the harvest and the communal suffering of the long dry season. Because here, deep in the ancestral village, no one ever starves in absolute isolation. If the rains fail completely and the clay granary is empty, the entire community shares the heavy burden of hunger equally. If a thick mud wall collapses during a violent, unexpected tropical storm, 20 pairs of hands will be there the very next morning to mix the wet clay. This impenetrable, invisible web of mutual human reliance is their ultimate, unbeatable survival mechanism. They choose to stay in these extreme environments, not because they are physically trapped, but because the land literally holds the bones of their ancestors. To permanently leave the land would be to sever the invisible, sacred tether that binds them to their history, their identity, and their ancient gods. As the long, heavy night completely covers Togo, the entire country sleeps under the vast, indifferent gaze of the cosmos. Tomorrow, the brutal sun will inevitably rise again. The ocean will roar, the mist will settle, the dust will blow, and the heat will press down against the earth like a massive physical weight. And the people will wake up quietly in the dark. They will pick up their heavy ropes, their iron machetes, and their empty clay jars. And they will step outside to begin the cycle all over again. They will continue to carve out a meaningful existence on the absolute, razor-thin edge of human endurance. They will continue to write their quiet, magnificent, unyielding story directly into the red soil of West Africa. You are watching Pure Travel. If these unfiltered, raw images of human resilience and the breathtaking reality of Togo have moved you, please leave a comment down below. Tell us which part of their incredible, daily survival journey resonated with you the most. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an expedition. The world out there is still incredibly vast, and there are countless forgotten corners where the human spirit is fighting quiet, epic battles with nature. Next time, we will take you to a place where the earth itself literally boils, following a dangerous, muddy river through a desolate, steaming volcanic wasteland. Until then, keep wandering, keep observing, and never